Welcome to Concussion Talk Podcast. My name is Nick Mercer. I write Concussion Talk, www.concussiontalk.com. This is episode 18, and I'll be talking to Mike Luke. Mike is a World Rugby Medical Educator. He is also a certified kinesiologist. He is co-owner-cooperator of Pony Locale, a Pilates and Kinesiology studio here in St. John's, NL, Canada. In August 2016, Mike was asked to be a concussion spotter for a World Rugby sanctioned tournament, Rugby Americas North Men's Under 19 and Women's 10s Rugby Tournament. I talked to Mike about his involvement at this tournament, what his role was, what he had to do, what he saw, and I also talked to him about what he does as a certified kinesiologist working with clients here in St. John's. My guest is Mike Luke, and I will get him to introduce himself and talk about what he does and where he works.
Hi, my name is Michael Luke. I'm a World Rugby Medical Educator and a certified kinesiologist, co-owner and cooperator of Pony Locale.
That's here in St. John's. So where else have you worked?
I've worked with several clinic studios in the city in St. John's. Where after I studied athletic therapy in Calgary, I worked in several clinics out there as well, working with athletes.
Okay, great. So, what is your educational background?
Yeah, I first of all I studied kinesiology at Memorial University, and then I went on to study athletic therapy at what would have then been Mount Royal College, and that was a joint program between University of Calgary and Mount Royal, which is now Mount Royal University.
Okay, so during your education of that Mount Royal, or even here in MUN, was there any training or on the treating or recognizing of concussion or brain injury?
There certainly was in athletic therapy as we were dealing with athletes and contact sport. It was quite rigorous training, actually, as far as learning assessment tools, recognizing concussion, how to apply that assessment, and then what to do in a case where a concussion would be suspected. Yeah. Okay,
so were you given an actual definition of concussion? Not that you have to repeat it now, but was there one given to you?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And did you know, has that changed and you're just updating what you know about?
No, I think the way they classify concussions has changed, but ultimately the definition is still the same.
Okay, and actual now, this summer you were in the U.S. and Florida for the tournament. Can you talk rugby
right.
tournament?
Rugby Americas North, which is a region within World Rugby, was hosting a under 19 rugby tournament as well as a women's 10s in Miami, Florida.
Okay, so what was your role there?
My role within that tournament was working with the medical teams. So there would have been a non-surgical sports doctor there, as well as a physiotherapist, and then myself. So we would do taping for the teams beforehand, do any sort of pre-game checks with the athletes. And then our main purpose, obviously, was to react to any injury or any concussions that may or may not have happened on the field. And so we would essentially be that front line of defense and then assess what would need to be done.
So did you have to spot them, recognize them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so essentially within Rugby Canada, Rugby Americas North, and World Rugby, their approach is recognize and remove. Oh. So between the three of us, as well as the coaches and the referee themselves, everyone has to go through a type of training to be able to do that. And one of our main jobs was to recognize concussion or potential concussion. And in which case, if we suspected it, the player would be removed. The only time that a player would return would be at the more professional levels, where you would have a accredited medical doctor within that professional organization who would perform a SCAT 3 or use an assessment tool to see whether or not that player was fit to return to play. But outside of that, it's the approach is recognize and remove.
So where do you were you part of the team there, team handler, or were you independent?
No, we were part of the World Rugby medical team. Yeah, so they essentially were sponsoring the event or sanctioning the tournament, and then so we represented them as the medical team, and then we provided those services for the tournament.
Okay, so all the physiotherapists and athletic trainers that were these concussion spotters were independent as well?
No. Everyone there would have been accredited through World Rugby.
Okay, but they were independent of teams.
Independent of teams, yes, unless a team required us to act as their medical therapist or their medical trainer, or and there was there were several teams there that didn't have a medical personnel, so we would potentially, one of us would go off and work with that team.
So would that be decided at the game?
That'd be at the game, yeah.
They'd say, "We need your help."
We need your help. So we would sort of do like a small assessment if a player came off willingly or unwillingly, and then we would sort of do a quick assessment, potentially on pitch or on the sideline. If they needed further treatment, like to see the doctor, we would do that, and then the doctor would determine whether or not we needed further treatment, i.e. an ambulance, or if what sort of treatment they needed on the sideline.
Wow, so this is a bit off script, but this is interesting. So, your role would change? Yes, your role of the independent World Rugby sanctioned medical educator, would that change as you go part of the team?
No, not really. No, essentially we just sort of the difference was, rather than sort of working in between the two teams and running out there for either or, we would sort of work more specifically with their players. So if one of their players went down, we would act as their medical personnel. We would also support the team medical personnel. So say some teams had a physiotherapist that may or may not be accredited through World Rugby, but we would essentially act as their support. They still would have had to complete some sort of training in terms of recognizing concussion and then appropriately removing them from play. Yeah.
So given that not all teams had athletic trainers or therapists, they I assume they didn't have any doctors or neurologists.
Correct. Yeah. Most medical personnel there would have been an athletic therapist or athletic trainer in the United States, or a physiotherapist. One team, the Mexico team, had a paramedic as their medical personnel. So yeah, it varied, but I think there may have only been one team that actually had a team doctor per se, but most of them would have been like advanced first responders, athletic therapists, or physiotherapists.
Wow.
Yep.
So were you said like in your training as athletic therapist, you were told to recognize concussions and treat concussions.
Yes.
For potential concussions.
Yep.
But so were you taught by World Rugby how to do this?
Well, separately in the athletic therapy program, that would have been within the program, as part of the curriculum there.
Yeah.
And but World Rugby does the same. When I trained as a medical educator, it was to become an educator of first aid courses, specific for rugby. And within that course, there's a small component there to help educate either coaches, referees, and or parents, anyone who's going to be there present at the game, how to recognize a player and who may or may not have suffered a concussion, and then what to do thereafter.
Okay, so it was obviously different than your athletic therapy training.
Yeah, it wasn't as intense.
And sport, a little more sport specific. So
yeah, that's right.
What was the other? Just really different question. Now, what was the main? Aside from concussion, what was the main injury that rugby players often suffer? It's
bumps and bruises, sprains and strains, really more than anything. Yeah, there were a couple, players that ended up not being concussed, but they were removed from play because they had a gash on the head or a cut on the head. So there was some amount of trauma to the head, and they were quickly removed from play and weren't allowed to continue. But yeah, one time there was quite a large gash on this guy's head, so he was removed from play, and of course the doc stitched him up. One of the other things that was quite present there was heat stroke and heat exhaustion, because we were in Miami, Florida, and it was quite warm there. And and the interesting thing with that is you really need to be mindful of play, because of course when people are quite exhausted due to the heat, tackling gets pretty sloppy, and when tackling gets pretty sloppy, you have people hitting their head pretty hard, and of course that happened quite a lot. We had several concussions, and we had several athletes end up leaving in a hospital, in an ambulance, to go to the hospital. Yeah, we probably had about a half dozen. A couple related to neck injury. There were one or two that were related to neck. Thank goodness he was cleared at the hospital. Yeah. But again, their approach is a proactive approach now, and that's you're not taking any chances.
Okay. Well, actually, speaking of that, then you just go through the process. If you're on the sideline, you think someone has had a concussion. Well, what's the process? How's that all go about?
Well, yeah, it's pretty easy if the player's gone down and is down on the ground for any length of time, and you've suspected a concussion. Essentially, when you're safe, when it's safe enough for you to run onto the pitch, because that's the thing in rugby. Play very well may continue, even with the player down. The referee, if he or she has seen the hit, the referee is now instructed to stop play immediately if he or she suspects a concussion or a head injury. Yeah. But say that the referee missed that, and then essentially if it's safe for myself or one of the other advanced first responders or medical educators or whatever to run onto the pitch, then we'll do that. And of course, if we suspected a concussion, that player will be removed. If it's a little more difficult, like we haven't seen the hit, then what will happen is you're sort of watching for signs and symptoms of, like, is someone dizzy, or do they appear confused, or are they behind play, ahead of play? You're looking for these signs of a concussion, or they may very well maybe grabbing their head, and which has suggested some amount of they've knocked their head clearly, and in that case, again, you're not taking any chances. You're just removing them. That's it.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's say, if you recommend a player, or say a player you should sit, how long do they have to sit for?
Essentially, if you've suspected a concussion, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, if we're digging out, like they go, you should sit down because you've had a concussion.
We're monitoring that player. They'll sit with the team. If we suspect, say for example, if there's something more severe to do with the neck and spine, but the doctor has cleared like a cervical injury or a neck injury of any kind, they might stay a little closer to the doctor, and then my role would have been to look back out onto the pitch, and the doctor would have kept a closer eye on them on the sideline, and then I continue on with the other physio to see what's going on with the play. But generally speaking, we essentially would follow up with them almost every 10 minutes, but we would sort of keep a close eye on them. And then we would also follow up with them at the hotel where everyone was staying, or we would instruct their medical personnel.
Was everyone at one hotel?
Everyone was at one hotel.
Nice.
Yeah. So it was pretty easy to keep track of them. And again, as I said, we instructed their medical personnel as well to keep a close tabs on anyone that we suspected had a concussion.
So was there any feedback from your team players, coaches, other team staff about how you and other medical educators? Yeah,
it worked really well. I think the coaches and the teams themselves were quite appreciative of the medical team and the medical staff. We worked really well, really efficiently well together. And I think in future, World Rugby's plan, and certainly Rugby Americas North, is to have potentially even more sort of teams, medical teams like this that work well together, like a team doctor, a physio, and someone like a runner in between, who may sort of do some sideline work, may do some teamwork, check in with the doctor, so everyone's always supported. So I think generally speaking, it was well received.
Good.
Yeah.
So this is another off-script question, but
Sure.
any players decide themselves, oh, I got to come out. This is hit my head, or nobody saw it.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing is in that education piece, players are often included in that. The referees and the coaches themselves will relay a lot of the information to the teams, and they will stress the importance of removing yourself from play if you're suspecting something.
Yeah.
Difficulty with concussion is you're often confused, right?
Yeah,
so, but if they suspect a head injury, they might very well walk off and say, I knocked my head. Some guys try to tough it out and say, oh yeah, no, I didn't hurt myself. I'm fine. I'm totally there. But if the coaching staff, referees, or the medical staff suspect a concussion, that's it. There's no defense.
I guess on the elite levels, especially if they're above, they're more apt to say, I'm fine.
That's right.
There's more understanding.
Generally speaking, though, it's about educating everyone so that everyone has a sense of what's going on, including other teammates, right? If teammates suspect their buddy has a concussion, they might even say to the referee, or they might say to the coach, something's going on here, and it might not be during play. It might actually be on the sideline or something like that. But it's important that everybody's in the loop.
So these protocols are relatively new to World Rugby,
pardon me, say again?
These protocols?
They've been in the works for some time now, but they're certainly since the World Cup that we just had. They've been implemented much more so now and supported. There's a lot more education around it now, and different training programs for coaches and referees. The coaches and referees actually now within those regions, it's mandatory for them to do an online component so that they understand concussion, the severity of concussion, and how to recognize concussion.
So it was a successful tournament.
I believe so. Yeah, it went off really well. As far as World Rugby standards go, like anything, there's a learning experience with it all, and I think probably there were a few moments within dealing with the ambulances and hospitals that needs to improve a little bit better. A lot of times, paramedics, they're brand spanking new to rugby, so they don't understand the game.
Especially in the States, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So sometimes, myself or one of the other medical staff would have a quick sort of little chat on things to look out for and then what to expect with some of those paramedics. But all in all, it worked quite well.
There's just totally tournament questions, but how many teams were there?
I believe there were 9 teams from the Caribbean region, and then there was also USA South and Mexico.
Okay, so no Canada wasn't there.
Canada wasn't there. No, it was Mexico, USA South, as I said, Trinidad, Tobago, Jamaica, Caymans, Bahamas, Bermuda. I think it might have been Bermuda. I'm not sure. So real interesting group of.
Who won?
USA South did.
Oh,
yeah. They defeated Mexico in the final.
And
Mexico won the last time, so USA South were quite happy.
So it was a close game?
I actually wasn't there for the final.
Okay.
I'd fly home beforehand, but apparently it was. Yeah.
Okay, so we're now on to your certified kinesiologist training.
Yeah.
So I've trained with you several times now. Mm-hmm. Strength trained and whatever.
Yep.
And I'm 13 years after my severe brain injury. So, what's your training say that I need to work on right now, but in general, what I need to work on, I think when you look at me doing whatever.
For sure. I think the first and most important thing is to assess where you are, or where the individual is, or where he or she is, and then identifying those strengths. And make sure that we highlight those and support them, but more importantly also recognizing the imbalances. So where does the individual need to work on? And essentially challenge the brain to remap how the body essentially works and functions.
And do that for every injury.
I do that for pretty much every single injury. Absolutely is identifying imbalances within the body, and then how we go about achieving more balance within the body and more function, improved function.
Okay, so for me, I know my left side is weak, but just generally to improve, let's say my left shoulder shoulder girdle is weaker.
Yeah.
So how would you, just for an example, how would you go about improving my I don't have much like speed or rapidity. My movement there's not.
Well, the first thing is, we want to make sure that the shoulder is stable in a good place. Well, actually, to take one step back is to look at your posture.
Yeah.
So shoulders often react to posture, or they will react to posture, right?
Yeah.
They're connected just by soft tissue. And
if
you're more rounded in your spine, your shoulders are much more, they're going to be much more forward.
Yeah.
And so first things first is the alignment of your spine and the relationship between your ribs and your pelvis. And once we find balance there, or as close to a neutral spine as we can, that we don't have to do as much work then in the shoulders as if we didn't do anything with the spine at all.
Right. Okay.
So once we do that, then we can start really focusing on performance once you've achieved some amount of stability and balance within the shoulder girdle. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a good example. This is actually a bit strange. This is the first time I've done like a live interview, I guess, because Mike is actually in my condo with me here doing the interview. So just want to thank him for doing this, and thanks to World Rugby for getting Mike the chance to turn and tell us about it. And so thank you, Mike.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you again to Mike for talking to me today. Please check out his website, www.ponylocale.ca. That's www.ponylocale.ca. On Twitter at Pony Locale, same spelling, and on Facebook. You can learn more about World Rugby's concussion regulations and tournaments by going to www.worldrugby.org. Thank you all for listening, and until next time. As always, the music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound, www.bensound.com.